Let's talk robust wide receivers because we can discuss some of these early round wide receiver picks. Scott, robust wide receiver, what is it? What type of leagues should be considering the strategy?
Right. Just before I go into that, I just want to piggyback two things on what you just said. One, wide receivers inside, outside, you chart them, you stat them, you evaluate them. So it's possible, Matt, that you have more confidence drafting wide receivers later, round 5, 6, 7, 8, because you've done the legwork and that's an expertise of yours. Ask yourself, dear listener, are you really good at the running back position and evaluating and finding guys who aren't starters? Steer into what your strengths are. Where have you hit before in the past? What positions do you seem to understand? And maybe there isn't an answer to this. Maybe it doesn't apply to you. Case of Matt, he's a wide receiver guy. He's made his bones on that. He puts the work in on that. So it's not surprising to me that Matt would be more comfortable drafting wide receivers later than the average person might. And so I think that that's a very important thing to consider. Okay, robust wide receiver. And also a lot of these strategies work in concert, right? Like if you go zero RB or hero RB, that might be because you're going robust RB at the same time. So these strategies can work together hand in hand collaboratively. And a lot of my teams are going to be robust RB. And this is where you have to ask yourself a setup question. Do you start two wide receivers or three? If you only start two, it's not that hard to fill them. If you start three, I think it's more important to have a wide receiver room that's the envy of the league, especially if you have flexes and maybe 4 or 5 wide receivers might go and play. And by the way, if you want to add more skill to your league, add more starting players. Put more flexes in there. Yes, you have more to root for. And people say, the league doesn't have enough good players. Of course it does. It's just you have to lower your expectations of what your third receiver will do, what your flex player, what your second flex player will do. But what happens when you start more players is that, okay, my star player just went down in the first quarter on Sunday. If your league starts 6 or 7 guys, you're kind of screwed. If your league starts 10 or 11 or 12 guys, you can offset it much easier because his impact isn't as significant. He's a lesser percentage of your output. So to me, you get true. I remember one league that had heavy starters. I had Peyton Manning throw 6 touchdowns or 7 touchdowns in a game or something like that. I didn't win my game. And you know what? I wasn't even mad. I thought this is not a bug. This is a feature.
I would be mad.
It was week 1. I think I ended up still.
Doesn't matter. You're a better man than I am. Nothing makes me more upset than being the guy that has like the Jamar Chase 50-point week against the Ravens last year and you still lose. And it's always funny, Scott. Sorry to just completely derail, but it's always funny because I'm normally the guy that posts you played against Jamar Chase in fantasy, like see you next week or whatever. And you always get, 3 or 4 replies that are like, no, I actually have Jamar Chase and I lost. That kills me as a fantasy player. So I'm commending you for being a much better person than I am.
I also say, look, total points, more fair, head-to-head, more fun. That's the life we live in fantasy. A lot of my leagues have hybrid rules where some of it is the head-to-head, some of it's the total points. We have a weekly prize winner. We put one of the playoff teams as a team that scores the most points. By the way, in Yahoo leagues, totally customizable. The commissioner can set up the playoff seedings any way he wants or she wants. And you can say, okay, I want one of the playoff spots to go to the team that scored the most points that had a lousy record because they were unlucky because you can't stop the other team. You don't control who you play on the schedule and stuff like that. That's one of my favorite tweaks. I don't know if you'll do a show on that later. I'm sure somebody will write an article for it for hybrid formats, either you or me or Boone or maybe Mo Castillo or somebody, one of our great colleagues at Yahoo. So, or one of our, contractors might do it, and whatever, fiddle around with settings. So robust RB. Reason I like to go this way, if we're starting 3 or more receivers, and every league I set up is going to do that, is the idea. I talked about it earlier. Tyreek Hill goes out. There's not a Tyreek Hill Jr. Jamar Chase goes out. All of a sudden, Yoshivas doesn't become an 11 touchdown guy. He got a lot of playing time last year with T. Higgins hurt, and he still was quasi-startable, right? Like a wide receiver 3-4 at best. So because the waiver wire, I know Puka popped his rookie year and all that, but it's just so less likely to give us an impactful player than maybe the running back pool might. The idea that most of the impactful wide receivers will be drafted, I want to pound that position. If I need 3 or more starters, I want to have the best wide receiver room I can. And you just can't get as much help. Once you get past round 10, round 11, you're really skimming. Is it a Jalen Coker breakout season? Right. You're really hoping. Is this the year? Maybe DeMario Douglas, who I think actually might be a single-digit round guy by the end of draft season. He's had some good camp reports in New England. I like him there. And obviously we like Drake May. We like Josh McDaniels. But you're not going to find wide receivers for next to nothing by and large, with very rare exceptions. So if you need to start 3 or more, I think robust RB makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, this is so sensitive to like, what is your lineup? What's your format, right? Obviously at Yahoo, we're a half PPR is our standard, but are you a full PPR league? That makes it even more sense for us to just hammer that wide receiver position. And again, I'll throw it back to these debates I had about zero RB with Michael Fabiano back in the day at NFL Network. And like, I was young and dumb and super idealistic, so I just thought that I was right. I'm right about everything. I mean, that's how it is when you're in your early 20s, but we're all growing and hopefully getting better. I know I'm hopefully growing and hopefully getting better. But anyways, I say that to say that, like, one of Fabs' big points to me was, dude, you got to remember, like, you're on NFL.com, you're talking to like people that have, 10 team leagues, full, like they were full standard at that point. Half PPR wasn't, or PPR wasn't the standard over there. It was just like full standard, old school, no PPR fantasy. Like zero RB is not necessarily these like hammer the wide receiver early. Like, congratulations, you have 2 starting wide receivers and a flex, and you have 5 great wide receivers. You're benching one of those guys on an every week basis, and you probably are super frustrated because like that benched player, you're like, oh great, your 5th wide receiver is Terry McLaurin, and this is the week that he had 98 yards and 2 touchdowns, and you're annoyed because you didn't play him. So I just say that to say that little anecdote is all about, hey, remember your league settings. If you're going to go like this robust wide receiver, definitely make sure you do have those 3 starting wide receiver spots. Maybe you have a couple of flexes. Maybe you're getting that full point PPR. That's great stuff. The second point there that I wanted to note about this, Scott, is that yes, I definitely love obviously I'm all about the wide receivers. I'm about the depth of the position. Like, I can tell you deep down the board that I think guys like Josh Downs and even Rashid Shaheed or Rashad Bateman are like great starting level wide receivers. But what's the opportunity for those players? What's the situation for those players? And that's what can be so appealing about the robust wide receivers, that yeah, I'm charting the depths of the league. I also know how damn good those guys are at the top, right? I know how good those players are at the top. So I definitely think that, it's very appealing to stack up multiple of those star wide receivers early, because it can be such a set it and forget it position when you get it right.
Yeah, and I got to call a flag on myself because I set up the grid that we're working off, the script that we're working off. Robust RB was the first strategy we mentioned. Then we got to wide receivers. I just called it robust WR, robust wide receiver, but I kept saying robust RB because robust RB is more in the phrase that gets thrown around the industry. Maybe I should have called this dominate at wide receiver or stack wide receiver, get the best wide receiver,
the reception
room, whatever it
perception
is.
Strategy. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. So, I apologize. I probably misspoke and said robust RB about 5 times when I meant robust wide receiver. Good. I should have come up with a different term. Again, I go back to anchor RB was my phrase. Hero RB came out. That's so much better. I'm not the greatest brander. I'm not the greatest marketer. And this is just more proof of it. But yeah, I'm a big fan of build that great wide receiver room. And also, depending on how strong your opponents are. Okay. People always say, should I stack? Should I stack? Right. I think stacking is a great strategy if you're trying to beat a contest that has a ton of people in it, or you're trying to beat a room that's really, really sharp and you need to have the simplest dynamic scoring possibilities, which is, okay, I'm going to get Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. I'm going to get, obviously you can get Burrow and Chase. That would be great. I'm going to get a signature quarterback and his signature pass catcher. Sometimes it could be a tight end, of course, but the more I respect my room, the more I'd look to a stack. The less competitive my room is, the more I think you just beat people with a collection of good decisions. I don't think stacking is as important, but you can't talk about wide receivers, at least without mentioning stacking a little bit on the side. So I just want, when people say stacking, don't force it. You don't stacking, hey, I came up with a stack. I have Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze. I don't know if that's going to amount to anything. We'll see, but I'm open to stacking. I'm more likely to do it the more difficult I think my room is going to beat.
I also think that, in terms of stacking like same wide receivers from the same team, I think that some people are hesitant to do that. it does kind of depend on opportunity cost, right? Like it might be pretty in a non like best ball format. It might not necessarily make sense to, hey, let me get Jamar Chase and T Higgins. Cause that's one of those rare opportunities. If Jamar Chase went down, like T Higgins would go to the moon, and vice versa. Honestly, that's like typically when like wide receivers, not as you mentioned, Tyreek Hill goes down, Tyreek Hill Jr. steps up. It's the targets concentrate more to the already established players. But you know, in the later rounds, I don't mind double tapping like a Jaden Reed and a Matthew Golden, you know, kind of an ambiguous wide receiver room, because like if one of those guys ends up being the right answer, I'm going to get a huge profit. And in the meantime, like it's still just a usable wide receiver 4 on an offense that I think is good. So don't necessarily just always run away from the crowded target trees, the ambiguous wide receiver rooms, especially when there's some potential profit there. But Scott, anything else on wide receivers?
Let me mention one other thing
Okay.
about stacking. Okay. This is kind of like the floor stack, but I'm not afraid to do it. It has to be a very specialized offense. I think about like the year that Peyton Manning and the Broncos broke all the records and they just steered all their touchdowns to 4 guys. That was a situation where you could have no Sean Moreno there. He was a bell cow. And one of the receivers. You could have the late Demaryius Thomas, great player. You could have Wes Welker. You could have Thomas, the tight end. Julius Thomas was a double-digit touchdown guy. I would be okay if you drafted Jamar Chase up front, and then at some point, Chase Brown was the right pick. I have no problem with that. I think in the Fantasy Football Index draft, I started with Bijan Robinson, second round. The very Matt Harmon approved Drake London was available. I'm like, I don't care. It's the best ball league. There's no transactions. I think Atlanta's going to be a pinball team. I think that division we always talk about is going to be a lot of 33-30 football. I'm not opposed to, if the target tree is concentrated, if the team has carnival potential, I can live with 1 pass catcher and 1 running back. I have no problem with that.